Hello, fellow basement dwellers, and in today's video we will be discussing the downfall of the Imperium and the entire 40k galaxy, because the tyranids have won. Well, not yet necessarily, but the tyranids will win 40k. Now, of course, I'm not just talking about 10th edition coming around and the tyranids being the new big bad. I'm talking about tyranids from day one were destined to win 40k. And there's three main reasons why. The first reason is they're nearly limitless. They're coming from all sides of the solar system and from below, and soon are probably going to be pulling in from above. So we're completely surrounded by tyranids that seem as though they are limitless in number. Not limitless in the way the Imperial Guard are limitless. There's still a finite number of guards in it. I mean truly unfathomably limitless numbers of tyranids pouring into our galaxy. No matter how many times we win, there will always be more. And the second reason we're gonna lose is because gene stealers. I don't think people understand how big of a deal gene stealers are. When gene stealers infect a planet, and that planet gets eaten by tyranids a few years or even decades or maybe even a century later, that's the good ending for gene stealers. That's the dream ending for gene stealers. Well, that's the dream ending for the Imperium. That's the best possible thing to happen to a gene steal planet that's just hyper-infected where a good chunk of the population is gene steals. The best possible thing that can happen is the hive mind comes and cleanses it of all life, leaving it barren. The worst thing that can happen is the planet stays functioning. Because gene stealers, after they have a big enough cult, will infect the military of the planet, will infect the nobility of the planet, and then all of a sudden, this planet that's been stagnant for like 3,000 years, all of a sudden they've begun mass-producing medical supplies. That's good. The Imperium's always low on medical supplies. Of course, no one knows that it's actually a gene stealer planet, and all of those medical supplies are tainted with gene stealer genetic material. Oh, this planet that was a drain on the Imperium that was barely contributing is now producing dozens of guard regiments. That's great. All those guard regiments are infected with gene stealers, who will then go on to infect more of the Imperium's military. And because gene stealers, after they get to a point, they start out by infecting normal people. Now keep in mind, this is going to be an abridged version. I haven't done my full research on gene steal, so this is going to be a very quick overview. If you want a more in-depth look at gene steals, please watch this video or read some books. Gene stealers start out by infecting someone, then that person gives birth to ugly, god-awful children, then those ugly, god-awful children give birth to children who are slightly less god-awfully ugly, and then those god-awful children give birth to actual almost normal people, and those almost normal people give birth to essentially normal people, and those normal people give birth to actual giga-chads. Hyper-intelligent, hyper-athletic. Now keep in mind, they limit the amount of intelligence and athleticism this, last generation of gene stealers can have. So, instead of, Superman or Captain America, think just like LeBron James or giga-chad. So guess what? These gene stealers that are infected in the Imperial Guard are quickly going to rise to higher ranks, to the command structure, to the ranks of generals, admirals. I wouldn't be surprised if much of the upper elites of the Guard and the Navy are gene stealers. And the thing is they're also smart enough to realize that obviously, the super high ups are getting tested. So they're probably all the ranks below the testing areas are probably purely gene stealers, or 99% gene stealers. And even then, I wouldn't doubt if the majority of the generals and admirals have also been infected with gene stealers. Because guess what? They test for gene stealers. Just infect the guys who test for it. After you infect the entire medical crew of the Navy and Army, and guess what? You have an entire Navy fleet that is infected with millions of gene stealers that are all gigachads, they're gonna stop on a planet, and guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna be breeding with the natives of the planet. And given that it's all gene stealers, they probably leave a few gene stealers behind to start out a cult. So the Navy, which is supposed to be obviously, saving the Imperium, is obviously not doing that. So a gene stealer gets infected. So a gene stealer infects a planet. The planet doesn't get eaten by the hive mind, unfortunately. That planet then begins to send constant guard regiments out to the galaxy, and obviously the guard have to have someone, fly them around, the Navy. Then the Navy gets infected, and then any uninfected guard regiments from other backwater planets that haven't been infected by gene stealers yet, guess what? Because the Navy's infected, then any non-infected military is going to be infected with gene stealers. And the gene stealers are also smart enough to probably, yoink a few guys behind from a non-infected planet and then just send them back for whatever reason to infect their home planet. So yeah, I wouldn't doubt if a good 90 or 80% of Imperial worlds are heavily infected with gene stealers. Straight up, they made gene stealers too OP. I wouldn't even doubt if much of the Inquisition is also infected by gene stealers. Keep in mind, gene stealers can literally have a Giga Chad type dude who doesn't even know he's a gene stealer, who thinks who doesn't even know what gene stealers are, but then a little gene stealer just snap his fingers, and then it's a sleeper agent, instantly loyal to gene stealers immediately. So yeah, gene stealers alone are gonna demolish the Imperium, and if the Imperium falls, the galaxy falls. And the third and most important reason why the Tyranids are gonna win, you know that point where Tyranids can eat something and then adapt, to turn into that thing, kind of how earlier on when Tyranids first began eating Space Marines, not long after a few engagements with Space Marines, they noticed that the Tyranids got a lot tougher because they adapted, kind of Space Marine type organs and a Space Marine type rib cage and Space Marine type bone structure, and so all of a sudden the space bugs just got a huge buff. Tell me, what happens when they eat a Hood, or they eat a Crave, or they eat an Orc, which they have. They've eaten many of Orcs. Now these three alien species are the main reason why I think the Tyranids are going to win if they eat them. I'm going to start out with the Orcs because it's been confirmed that obviously they've eaten a ton of Orcs. Thanks, Inquisitor Quitman. Orcs grow bigger and stronger the more they fight. Orcs also have a psychic field that essentially buffs them and increases their intelligence. And on top of that, orcs are almost a fungus-type organism where you can whip out almost all of their organs and they'll just keep fighting, no problem. And on top of that, they don't need to eat. They can photosynthesize. And on top of that, they reproduce with spores. You kill an orc, a bunch of spores pop out and essentially infect the ground with all those spores. So tell me, what happens when Tyranids finally make the change from an insectoid-type species to a fungus-type species like the orcs, but still have all the benefits of being insectoid and being Tyranids? So imagine you have a normal Tyranid, except now that he's essentially a fungus, you whip out all of his organs, he just keeps on trucking. Heck, they'll probably be able to pump out a ton more Tyranid units, because guess what? These guys are now solar powered, meaning they don't need to eat, meaning they're not wasting calories. They just get all their calories from the sun, so they're able to pump out way more Tyranid units. And on top of that, the Tyranid units are probably going to cost less because you don't even need to make the organs, because they're plant-based. Unlike orcs who have the organs but don't really need them, the Tyranids can just skip that process, save a ton of, I guess, biomass points to put towards more Tyranids. And on top of all that, these new fungus-type Tyranids are also going to be able to weigh spores. And now, that's not their main thing. That's just like an extra FU Because you're still going to have these massive bioships toning out trillions of tyranids, except now when the tyranids die, they're releasing spores that make more tyranids that are obviously loyal to the hive mind. So it's like a second way to pump out even more tyranids. So like how if a single orc touches down on a planet and releases his spores, that planet will eventually fall to orcs. Now only a single tyranid has to land on a planet for that planet to be overrun by tyranids. Because eventually, tyranids can just do the same thing orcs do, except better. They can make it 10 times better than what the orcs can do. And not to mention, orcs are dumb and they're still a huge problem with the spores. The tyranids are hyper-intelligent. Yeah, so if you thought the idea that the tyranids might go from insectoid to fungus is bad, then strap in for this one. Do you know what the Hwud are? In case you don't know, the Hwud are this crazy alien race. If you want a more in-depth deep dive, please watch my video on them. But essentially, I'm going to give you the basic rundown. Essentially, the Hwud have the ability to rewind and speed up time. Mostly speed up, but they can rewind time. So what happens when the tyranids get their hands on a Hwud? They eat it, and all of a sudden, all of these new fungus tyranids are now able to age you to dust. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not going to age you to dust. They're going to age all of your weapons, fortresses, and equipment to dust. Because the Hwud could also target individual items to turn to dust. Like, if they wanted to mess with you, instead of just turning you to dust, they'd turn your bolter and armor to dust before then turning you to dust. Or they just turn everything to dust instantly. Now, the big problem with the Hwud is the fact that for the time dilation to get real spicy, like to have like a fully like young healthy space marine armored and armed just to like instantly turn in the dust and his armor to dust, you'd need like thousands of Hwud, because the Hwud's psychic ability to speed up time gets bolstered the more and more Hwud units are nearby. Tyranids are your swarm army. Let that sink in for a second. So imagine you're an Imperial Guardsman, and you're pushing back the normal tyranids, like the normal insectoid tyranids, right? And then all of a sudden, a new hive fleet shows up that is still tyranids, obviously, still look insectoid, but instead of being insects, are kind of fungus-based, so they're harder to kill, and there's way more of them, and they don't need to worry about having too many troops to feed, because guess what? Just leave them out, they can photosynthesize. And on top of that, now they're aging your equipment to dust. And I say your equipment because they're going to eat you. So you're sitting there in your fortress, and all of a sudden these new tyranids show up, and the walls of your fortress crumble to ash. You try to use your lasgun to defend yourself, but it rusts away before your flak armor then also rusts away before tyranids consume you. Are you getting the picture that tyranids with time dilation is not a good combo? Now, if you thought fungus time manipulating tyranids were bad, have you heard of a little known race known as the Crave? The Crave were a highly psychic race. Like, some of their top members were almost as powerful as the Emperor or Magnus. And the Crave were aliens that Lionel Johnson hunted almost to extinction during the Great Crusade. I said almost because still to this day, sometimes Crave pop in and out. Now, a big problem with the Crave, and their main problem actually, is they are so slow to reproduce. Like, so slow. There's so few Crave. Like, they are probably one of the single least common species that you can find all over the galaxy in 40k. In fact, I'd argue for species you can find over the entire 40k galaxy, they're probably the least common, especially these days. But they're still out there. And another big problem the Crave have is the fact that, although yes, some of their strongest cycles were almost as powerful as Magnus and the Emperor, that straight up takes them millions of years to achieve. Some of the Crave date back to almost the War in Heaven. So it takes tens of millions of years for them to get up to that power level. Because the older they are, the stronger they are. And from what I know, they are functionally immortal until killed. So what happens when a Tyranid eats a Crave, finds one and is able to take one down and eat a Crave for their psychic powers to get stronger, they're able to manipulate the DNA in order to essentially speed up the power process. As opposed to taking tens of millions of years to get up to a Magnus level threat, it will only take you maybe a few hundred, maybe a few decades, or maybe even just a couple years, maybe even a few days, given on how much Crave biomass they're able to accumulate and how much the Tyranids are able to manipulate the DNA and to make it faster. Now, that third one's a bit of a stretch, but even then, if they could have, like, just a few Tyranids on the back burner, that even if it did take them a few hundred years to get powerful, Tyranids have been in the setting for hundreds of years. So, if they eat a Crave, they just wait a few hundred years for their cycles to get big boy Magnus level powerful, because I imagine they would be able to speed up the power process, taking it from millions of years to hundreds of years. I do think decades is a little much, but let's just say they can speed up that process to a few hundred years. They're almost as powerful as Magnus, or someone like that. Good God, when a few thousand or even 100 Tyranids are able to absolutely body and overpower everything psychically because they're just that powerful. Because Tyranids have some powerful cycles as it is. Imagine if they were to add Crave DNA to Swarm Lords, keep them in the back for a little bit, and then in a few hundred years have them come back more powerful than Magnus. Yeah, terrifying thought. So yeah, it is entirely possible that fungus-based Tyranids that no longer have any essential organs, so there's essentially no weak spots to shoot, are constantly shooting out fungal spores to make more Tyranids, on top of their bioships also pumping out Tyranids. On top of that, their bioships would no longer have to worry about running out of food or fuel. Tyranids would no longer have to cannibalize, because Tyranids would literally just be able to photosynthesize. A big problem that Tyranids have is being starved out in Scorched Earth campaigns like what Inquisitor Quitman did. But what if Inquisitor Quitman went through all the effort of killing trillions of innocent people just to have the Tyranids wait by a sun for a few days and then keep on trucking? And then on top of that, they're aging your spaceship to dust, they're aging your fortress to dust, they're aging everything to dust but you, so they can devour your biomass. And then on top of all of that, in a few hundred years, they're going to be hitting you with unfathomably strong cycles that are just going to be able to absolutely obliterate everything. Like, imagine a single Swarm Lord that's almost as strong as Magnus, except actually good at melee, and there's dozens, if not hundreds of them. And even if they don't, sit them on the back line to wait, the Crave are still just so unfathomably strong cycles. Even if you want wishful thinking and think the Tyranids can't speed up the psychic process of, the Crave taking millions of years to accumulate power, at the end of the day, the hive mind as itself, even if 40k is able to repel it and able to kick it out of the Milky Way galaxy, it's still going to be around for millions of years. So having that DNA is going to make the hive mind itself thousands of times more powerful over time. And even then, Crave don't start out weak. They start out as like a young Crave cycle is like the equivalent of Owiman, if not probably stronger. So even if they can't, speed up the process of, getting stronger, taking millions of years to a few hundred years, they'll still, you don't want them getting Crave DNA. They're going to be, even just having that right off the bat is going to make their cycles so much stronger, because the Crave are the best cycles in 40k. Better than the Eldar and better than the Perpetual. The only reason Lionel Johnson beat the Crave is because of plot armor. Yes, I know he had all the crazy techno-wizard stuff from the Dark Ages technology, like Men of Iron, but given how powerful the Crave were, he shouldn't have won. And yes, I know the Lion is debatably the best Primarch duelist. So yeah, what's your opinion on a possibility of these absolutely OP sinister tyranids that can have almost full power over time, pure power over psychic energy, and can now photosynthesize? And again, the biggest problem with the Crave and the Hood is they will so slow to breed and so few in number. There's gonna be trillions, octillions of tyranids as powerful with the same abilities as the Hoods, and trillions of Swarm Lords that have the same psychic ability as the Crave, on top of being able to rewind and speed up time same as the Hood. So yeah, what is your opinion on the possibility of these new super tyranids? Now, is any of this ever going to happen in the lure? Absolutely not, God no. If they were to add this to the lure, first of all, having the tyranids be fungus-based instead of insect-based, I wouldn't really like from an aesthetic perspective. Neither would anyone else like. And not to mention, if they were to add these 3 alien DNAs and, like, add them in a good way, like how I described, the tyranids would just win. The tyranids would win so easily if they had those abilities. So no, I don't think the tyranids are going fungus-based. I don't think they're gonna, be eating Crave or eating, the Hood. Now again, the Hood and the Crave are kind of hard to find, but given how many tyranids there are, and there's still a decent amount of both aliens, they would eventually find one. Now, I don't think any of those 3 DNAs are ever going to be added again. It does... Again, if they were to add these kinds of DNAs to the tyranids, even Ultramarine plot armor wouldn't save the galaxy. Anyway, what are your thoughts and opinions on the new super tyranid idea I had? Do you like my idea? Do you hate my idea? Are there any other obscure races that could really empower the tyranids? Or would there be any way to stop the tyranids or if the tyranids do ascend to this godlike plane of existence, would there be any way to stop them? Alright, I just have a personal announcement. I can't believe I've hit 150 subs. Thank you so much. Please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, do everything you're supposed to do, and see you in the next. By the way, for next week, I have a very good video cooked.